In today's video, I will be explaining what are clauses, the different types of clauses, their function and their usage. It will help you to clear your concept on the topic. Hope it's beneficial for you. Welcome, I'm Seema from Edufinite. If you have any queries, you can ask me in the comment section. Without any further delay, let's begin with the topic. What is a clause? Now, a clause is a group of words which will have a subject and a verb. Now, the subject can be a noun, it can be a pronoun, or it can even be a noun phrase. And the verb can be a single word verb or a verb phrase that has a relationship. That means the subject and the verb will have a relationship and conveys the full information about what the subject is or is doing. And in a clause, what will happen? There will be a subject, there will be a verb, and there will be a relationship between the subject and a verb. It will give us the full idea of what the subject is trying to do or what is the relationship of the subject with that verb, whichever is mentioned in that clause. Now, let's look into some sentences to understand it a little better. Here, we have just two words, Mira, which is a noun, and laughed, which is a verb. Now, if we use these two words, Mira laughed, we can easily understand what the subject is doing. Mira is laughing. So, Mira laughed is a clause. Okay, the next one. The people in the train were talking. So, the people in the train is the phrase. This is the noun phrase because this is the subject. So, this is the noun phrase because the subject is always a noun, and since this is a phrase, so this is a noun phrase. And were talking is the verb phrase. So, there is a relationship between the people in the train and were talking. Who were talking? The people in the train. So, this is how a clause works. Now, in the third sentence, do it please. Now, here we see that do, of course, is the verb, but there is no subject. Well, there is a subject. It's hidden. It's you do it please. So, you is hidden. We usually don't say you do it. We just say do it please. So, in a clause, a subject might be hidden at times, but a verb must always be present. In certain exceptional cases, the subject might be hidden, just as I have said in this last sentence, do it please. But the verb has to be always present. Okay, now we come to types of clauses. Clauses are mainly of three types. So, independent clauses, coordinate clauses, and subordinate clauses. Now, let's look into each one of them. Now, independent clause, and independent clause is also known as the main clause. Now, has a subject and a verb. Naturally, it's a clause, so it will have a subject and a verb and makes complete sense by itself. So, you don't need any additional words or any additional part to be attached to it. By itself, it will give you the complete meaning. So, it looks like a regular sentence. Now, naturally, it will be a simple sentence. It looks like a regular sentence, so it will be a simple sentence. For example, Sam bought a new laptop. So, here, Sam is the subject. Bought is the verb. So, Sam bought a new laptop is the main clause or independent clause. Now, this is a simple sentence. So, a single independent clause or a single main clause is always a simple sentence. We come to the next category, coordinate clauses. Well, a coordinate clause is formed when two or more independent clauses are joined together by a coordinating conjunction. Just previously we did main clause or the independent clause. It's a single clause, but it will make complete sense. So that's the simple sentence. But when we have two or more independent clauses being joined together by coordinating conjunctions, in that case, that's the coordinate clause. And what are coordinating conjunctions? You can remember by this acronym fanboys. F for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S for so. So fanboys, remember that, and you'll remember all the coordinating conjunctions. Okay, now let's look into some examples. He must work very hard or he will not do well. So he must work very hard. This is an independent clause because it's making a complete sense by itself. If we just say he must work hard, yes, we know he must work hard. He is the subject, must work is the verb, and so this is an independent clause. Again, he will not do well. So he is the subject, will not do. This is a negative sentence. So will and do is the verb. And over here, what is happening? So he will not do well. This is also making a complete sense. So these two independent clauses are joined together by the coordinating conjunction or. So now when two or more independent clauses are joined together by a coordinating conjunction, we have compound sentences. Now the next one. He worked very hard and did well in his final examination. So he worked very hard. That's the independent clause. Again, and did. Here, again, what is happening here? The subject he is hidden. We don't write twice, you know, he worked very hard and he did very well in his examination. When we join these two independent clauses, we remove or we hide or we don't write the second subject because it's the same thing. So we don't write it, we don't mention it. And so we write it as he worked very hard and did well in his final examination. So this is also a compound sentence. Okay. The next one is the subordinate clause. A subordinate or a dependent clause, again, will have a subject and a verb since it's a clause. But it can only make complete sense if it is attached to an independent clause. So without an independent clause, a subordinate clause will not be able to give the whole idea of what you're trying to say. It will only give a partial idea. So you'll have to attach an independent clause to it to get the whole idea of what you're trying to say. So, and it always starts with a subordinating conjunction. It might be if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, because. And if you take the acronyms, you can remember it as I saw a wabub. W-A-B-U-B. I saw a wabub. That way you'll be able to memorize the subordinating conjunctions. Okay, now let's look into a sentence. Although he still has his old laptop. So yes, it's beginning with the subordinating conjunction although. He has. He is the subject. Has is the verb. So, but if we say although he still has his old laptop, yes, we are getting an idea. But we will want to know more. What? Although he still has his old laptop. So then we attach the independent clause to it. Sam bought a new one. And we get the idea, although Sam had an old laptop, but he still bought a new one. So you can note one more thing, that when you attach a subordinate clause to an independent clause, you get a complex sentence. Okay, now one more thing I'd like to mention over here. If you take the subordinate clause and you remove the subordinating conjunction, then you'll get an independent clause. Yes, he still has his old laptop. If you just say that much, it's fine. But if you attach although to it, then you'll have to attach the independent clause to give the whole meaning. The next is placement of dependent clauses. Where can we place these clauses in a sentence? You have an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now the dependent clause can be either before the independent clause, or you can place it inside. You can insert it inside the independent clause, or you can place it after the independent clause. So let's look into the examples to understand it much better. So the Same sentence that we said earlier. Although still he has his old laptop, Sam bought a new one. Here, what we have done, we have attached a subordinating conjunction although, and this is an subordinating clause. Yes, this clause is placed before the independent clause. Now, in the next sentence, we'll insert it inside the independent clause. Sam, although he still has his old laptop, bought a new one. So, what have we done? We have taken the subject of the independent clause, and after the subject, inserted the subordinate clause and then completed the independent clause. A subordinate clause, not only a subordinate clause, any dependent clause inside an independent clause, we have to separate that dependent clause by 2 commas, once at the beginning, once at its end. And if we put the dependent clause right at the beginning and then it's followed by the independent clause, then we put a comma between these 2 clauses to separate them. Okay, now the third one, when we put it at the end of the independent clause. Sam bought a new one, although he still has his old laptop. So here, when we place the dependent clause at the end or after the independent clause, then we do not put any commas or we do not put any other punctuation marks. We just write them together. So these are the 3 ways how you place a dependent clause in a sentence beside the independent clause. It can be in the beginning, it can be in the middle, or it can be at the end. If it's in the beginning, it has to be separated by a comma from the independent clause. And if it's inserted inside the independent clause, in that case, the dependent clause has to be totally separated by 2 commas, one at its starting and one at its end. And the third, when you put it after the independent clause, then there is no commas to separate them. Okay, now the next one. Functions of the clauses. Now, clauses function, and how do they function? Clauses can perform 3 distinct functions or roles in a sentence, and based on that, they can be divided into adjective clauses, adverb clauses, and noun clauses. Now, let's look into each one of them. Adjective clauses. An adjective clause is a dependent clause and has a subject and a verb since it's a clause and functions as an adjective. That means it will describe the noun of an independent clause, obviously. It starts with a relative pronoun, who, whom, whose, which, or that, or with a relative adverb, when, where, or why. It's very easy to understand whether that's an adjective clause or not, because it will either begin with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. Now let's look into some examples. The cat that we saw yesterday gave birth to 2 cute little kittens. So the cat that we saw yesterday. So that we saw yesterday is the adjective clause. Here, that we saw yesterday, this adjective clause is telling us about whom? It is telling us more about the cat. Which cat? That we saw yesterday. So, this is an adjective clause. Well, the next sentence. My cousin, who said was not hungry, ate more than us. Now, in this sentence, of course, who said was not hungry. Yes, this is the adjective clause because it's beginning with the relative pronoun who, and it is telling us more about my cousin. Now, in certain sentences, we provide additional information about the noun. So, if it's an additional information, in that case, what do? We again put 2 commas, one at the beginning, one at the end, to say that this is an additional information, and that's not absolutely necessary for the sentence. For example, you can say my cousin ate more than us. So that makes complete sense. What have I done? I have added some additional information about my cousin, and that is who said was not hungry. So when you attach some additional information, then you separate that additional information by 2 commas. Now, you can say, what is the difference between my cousin who was not hungry ate more than us, and the other sentence, the cat that we saw yesterday gave birth to 2 cute little kittens? Well, in the first sentence, the cat. Which cat? The cat gave birth to 2 cute little kittens. If I just say this much, then you will not be able to understand which cat. So now I'm specifying that we saw yesterday. So this piece of information is vital for the sentence. Hence, it is not separated by commas because we have to include it in the sentence for proper understanding of the sentence. But in the second sentence, that's an additional information which, even if we don't write, will not hamper the meaning of the sentence. So, since that's an additional information, what do? We separate it with 2 commas from the main sentence. Okay. Now, the next one, I have no idea when I fell asleep. So, here, the clause describes the noun idea. When I fell asleep. Now, when I fell asleep is the adjective clause. It's beginning with the relative adverb when. And whom is it modifying? Because it's an adjective clause, it will modify a noun. It's modifying the noun idea. I have no idea. No idea was there. What no idea was there? When I fell asleep. So, when I fell asleep, I had no idea. Okay. Now, we come to the next one. The adverbial clause. An adverbial clause, again, since it's a clause, will have a subject and a verb and is a dependent clause. So, this is also a dependent clause and functions as an adverb. So, what does an adverb do? It will modify the main verb of the independent clause and gives information about the time, place, condition, reason, manner or purpose of action that occurred by asking questions how, when, where and why. So, just as an adverb does, so here also the adverbial clause will function as an adverb. Okay. Now, it starts with a subordinating conjunction. We have done that subordinating conjunction as I told you. If, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, with, because. I told you to remember I saw Wabab. I saw Wabab. So, if you remember that, you'll remember the subordinating conjunctions. Okay. Now, let's look into the examples. Ravi played the game confidently as if he played it many times. So, here Ravi played the game confidently is the independent clause and as if he played it many times is the adverbial clause because it's beginning with the subordinating conjunctions as if. And what is it happening? As if he played it many times. So, if you just say this much, it does not make complete sense. So, this is a dependent clause and it begins with the subordinating conjunction as if and what is it doing? It is modifying the verb of the main clause. What is the verb? Played. So, how did Ravi play? He played as if he had played it many times. So, he played it like a pro. And what question will it answer? How did Ravi play? So, he played it as if he had played it many times. So, this is an adverbial clause. Okay. We now come to noun clauses. A noun clause, again, since it's a clause, will have a subject and a verb and is a dependent clause, obviously, and it functions as a noun. A noun clause can be the subject or the object or a complement. So, it functions as a noun just as a noun does. It can be the subject, it can be the object, or it functions as a complement. Okay. Next, it starts with a pronoun or subordinating conjunctions. So, either it will start with a pronoun or it will start with a subordinating conjunctions and it will function as a noun. That's how you're going to identify the noun clause. Now, for example, whoever did it will face the consequences. So, whoever did it, this is the noun clause. It's beginning with whoever and whoever did it, if you just say naturally, it's not making complete sense. So, this is a dependent clause. It's a subject of the sentence and so it's a noun clause. Whoever is the subject and did is the verb. So, this is a noun clause. Now, if you replace this noun clause by the word the guilty, it still makes sense. So, this is a noun clause. This is another way to check whether that noun clause or not. You replace it with some noun and if it works fine, then it's a noun clause. The next sentence. Ravi cannot remember what he dreamt last night. So, what he dreamt last night is the noun clause, and Ravi cannot remember. What can't Ravi remember? What he dreamt last night. So you replace what he dreamt last night, because why is this a noun clause? Because this is acting as the object of the sentence and it's beginning with the pronoun what. What he dreamt last night. Moreover, you can replace it with his dream. Ravi cannot remember his dream. So it's working fine. So this is a noun clause. So that's all for today. Hope the lesson was useful. You can let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section. I'll be back soon with a new lesson. Till then, take care, stay safe and be happy.